started.
Okay, so we are recording. I will mute myself in a second. I need to get the deck kind of up, so share my screen. Oops. Okay, so I'll mute myself and ready to go.
Okay, so I'm just saying, welcome to we're going to put on my Celestial Systems and Invero. We're just in Vero, right? Not in Vero Digital?
Sorry, yeah, Invero.
Okay. Okay. So we were talking about the process. Okay. All right. So I'm going to kick this off again. I might do it multiple times. It shouldn't take more than, I'd say, 3 or 4 minutes if I have to do it multiple times to get through this. I don't think that's going to be the case. All right. Hello, welcome to a webinar put on jointly by Celestial Systems and Invero. Today we're going to be talking about application development. We're going to be looking at web application development end-to-end from a design perspective through architecture, development, testing and QA, and then priming for production. We have yourself, the moderator for the webinar today, Mark Wilson. I'm an account executive at Vero, but more importantly, we have Art Landro, strategic advisor at Celestial Systems. Art, if you just want to say hello, make sure we can hear you okay.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending. Really appreciate it and looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Art. Thanks for joining in as well. We also have John Dobson, cloud architect and founder at Vero. John, can you just say hi?
Hello, everyone. I'm also looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So Celestial Systems and Vero, we have extensive history working together to develop web applications. And today we're going to have some experts jointly from the company walking you through these topics. Before we get in, I thought it'd be a good idea for John and Art just to do a little bit of an intro, maybe 30 seconds each, just talk a bit about the respective companies. So Art, I'll put it over to yourself first. Perhaps if you want to just give us a bit of an overview of Celestial Systems and what you guys are all about, and help to give our audience a bit of a primer for the discussion today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. So Celestial Systems, we're coming up on our 20th anniversary. We are a Vancouver, Canada headquartered company, a boutique software systems and integration company with about 200 engineers, majority of them located in Bangalore or in Noida in India. We really focus on all the expertise required around the development of complex enterprise web applications that drive businesses across many different verticals. And we have expertise in front-end development, back-end integration, the QA and testing all of that, and then working with partners like Vero to actually deploy these into production and into the marketplace.
Awesome. All right, John, why don't pass it over to you and give us a bit of an overview of Invero.
Thanks, Mark. So Invero is it's a 3-year young company, but I have been in the business, IT development, enterprise, and SCADA systems for 30 years. And we took the opportunity to start this company so that we would be giving customers the best that they could do potentially in the cloud. And we're working with Celestial Systems to actually get the best of both worlds, great coders, great QA, and then the architecture and the infrastructure behind it, because it's a cloud world now.
Awesome, great intros, guys. Great, well, let's get into the topic here. So we're going to be doing a bit of a back and forth. We're going to go through each of these different aspects of web application development, and we're going to have contributions from both sides. So I'm going to be trying to keep us on topic here, but I think for the most part, it's going to be John and Art just kind of bouncing off each other and walking us through the different aspects of web application development, giving us an expert's opinion on these different things that go into this. So without further ado, I'll pass it over. I'll let you guys decide. I'm not sure who wants to go first on the design front. I think it looks like Celestial Systems might be up front, but Art, if you'd rather John take it away, feel free to throw the ball over to him. But I'll kind of take a step back at this point, let you guys take it over. So Art, why don't we jump it over to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good place to start. So in all of the work that we do with our customers that are looking to go digital and basically drive their business into an enterprise web application, it always starts with the business coming up with a requirements document based around a few things. So they've got to really have a deep understanding of what their business is and how does it flow. So that's very important. Who are the users of their business? Is this a external facing business to end user type customers like an e-commerce platform, or is it a internal application that their own employees are using? So again, a very deep understanding by the business owners and the application owner of these companies about who is using them, how they're being used, what are the locations inside firewalls, outside firewalls. Are there customers? Are they partners? Are they employees? And the best way to kind of lay out that flow is, sometimes it's called a war room, sometimes it's called storyboarding, but it's literally to get a bunch of white papers or a bunch of butcher block paper and literally storyboard out that flow of business, put in key parts around what you might want that user interface or the UI experience to be, and kind of have that high level flow understood and signed off by the product owner before you really involve the tech leads and the engineers. That's usually how we help our customers design their standard workflow into an enterprise application.
Awesome, great. John, we'll throw it over to yourself from
Yeah.
a design perspective and Vero.
Yeah, so we don't actually do as much on the design side or the requirement side. We generally take direction and lead from what Celestial Systems is doing with the customer. So everything that Art just laid out is part of the building blocks to actually get the best possible outcome. And we work with them at the architecture stage. So you heard Art say that the engineers aren't even involved yet. And it's critical actually not to involve the engineers as much in that, because people have to determine what they want first, and then they can start talking about it, because otherwise you'll get a completely different outcome.
Yeah, John, that's a really good point. We actually, in the design phase, we actually use what we would call designers and not developers, just so there is less of a technical focus and more of a design and a workflow and a UI UX type of experience. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah. The engineers will guide the process and overtake it. It will become that process instead of what you actually intended. So good point. So.
Yeah. So many times these developments become about the technology when it's really not. It's about the business.
Correct. Number one, most important thing.
Art, what would you say is maybe a common pitfall, or maybe even not necessarily a common pitfall, but one that can be very impactful, that a company that would feel like they have this really down pat might fall into, or something that you see that can happen that can really throw a major wrench into things that companies should look out for?
So we've found that change is always the most difficult aspect of any new project. There's a lot of not invented here going on. So what we encourage is a massive amount of collaboration. Get all stakeholders involved. Everybody gets a voice. You've all got to come together, but we also believe at the end of that process that everybody then has to be on board with whatever decision has been made. Are there new workflows? Is there a new process? Are you going to outsource a bit more of your business to make things more efficient? This is when you're building a new enterprise web application, it's a great opportunity to really look at the business and do things more efficiently. Change always generates angst in organizations, but it's the right time to embrace it.
Okay, great. So maybe it's good to have conflict in that initial in those initial design meetings, but when you walk out of that room, everybody has to be agreed on what the direction is and what the process is going to be, regardless of how much battling there might have been to get there.
Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it. Conflict is definitely encouraged, without resorting to fisticuffs.
Okay, great. Sweet. All right, let's jump over to architecture then. And then would it make sense, should we maybe have John from Vero kind of kick this off, and then we'll put it over to Art? Or why don't you take it from here for this one?
It actually, the process actually starts with Art. So again, you got the design and the requirements. We're still not fed all the information yet until they come up with these items that Art's going to talk about.
Right.
And as Art goes through them, if you want, I can interject per item or just go through them all, and we can talk about the value we add and the to what Celestial's doing within that process.
Okay, well, let's kick it over to Art then. Art, why don't you take it away here?
Yeah, so this I consider, thank you. I consider the architecture phase the most important critical phase. When I was CEO of Monte Vista Software, the founder and CTO was a great gentleman by the name of Jim Reddy, who was considered the founder of embedded systems. And he had a quote that was perfect. Architecture must not be an afterthought. You've got to get the architect right. You've got to get the architecture right. And like I said, I consider this to be the most important part. So this is where we have to extract that critical technical information from everything that came out of the design phase and has been put into the requirements document. Most teams start off, most technical teams start off by creating a wire diagram to actually visualize that functionality. And then this is where the technology selection is started. And we're talking about a wide range of information technology capabilities across many, many different aspects. And there are so many choices out there. This is a big challenge for the team. Do you choose a Java front end? Do you choose a JavaScript front end? There's so many JavaScript languages right now. Sencha was wildly popular. Then it took over by Angular. Now React is the fastest growing. Vue is up and coming. So which JavaScript technology to use? What's your back end technology going to be? Is it .NET? Is it Node.js? Is it PHP, Ruby on Rails? Another extremely important now, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, and lines up with Vero starting up, is do we deploy these applications on premise? Do we deploy it in the cloud? Do we start on premise and move to the cloud? Do we start in the cloud and we get huge, move it back on prem? So all of those technology discussions and choices need to be made during this process. Once those technology selections are made, you've got to kind of build that software stack and the end-to-end block diagram just to make sure that everybody understands what the touch points are, where the integration challenges are going to be, where front end hands over to back end, what the flow charts are looking like, and then surround this all with a set of program management processes and developer tools that can be broken up into little blocks and used in a very efficient way to manage the entire process. So, I know I said a lot in what I consider to be the most impactful part of the development and deployment of an enterprise web application, but I'm really enthusiastic about this phase.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we definitely have some opinions just on the cloud versus on-prem and the order of operations there. I'm sure John will touch on that. But John, why don't we kick over to yourself? And
so with what Art said there, it's very important to remember. I've seen large corporations not even go through a requirements phase. I've seen large corporations also not go through an architecture phase. So it is incredibly important either to do it now at a cost of 1 or pay 10 times the amount to re-architect it later. So it's always important to get your architecture patterns in early. And we help lots of companies with architecture of their application. So you've got to remember that within this phase, you've got everyone has to play to what they do best. Developers develop code best. Architects or infrastructure people develop infrastructure best. You can be good in both, but you can't be great in both. And what happens is you need to find a partner who's going to be able to help you to define these architecture patterns that reach your design or your requirements. So just an example of that would be Oh, well, we deployed the stack and it went on to a bunch of physical servers, and the customer had overwhelming demand, and the entire solution was never built to overstate that, meaning to scale up and to grow with it. So there's a load of different infrastructure patterns that are available in the cloud. Most of these are developed through automation, and as you know, 2 or 3 meetings managing the customer's expectations on what those architecture patterns are is what we do. So we can tell lots of different things about the architecture. They're all different, and they have to pick the right pattern moving forward. So that leads into the next point, which is data patterns. And the customer's data, you generally have front end and back end, and back end would be a data pattern. The customer has to realize that their data pattern selection, so what they're going to choose to actually put the data in, is it SQL, Postgres, Cosmos DB, you name it, has to be able to scale with those first requirements. And it actually is a very easy rudimentary selection. If you line up your requirements, I want this to be available worldwide and I want it to be very fast. You can design an architecture pattern or an infrastructure pattern on the front end, and then on the back end, through a secure networking channel, you would be able to actually have these data patterns that go in line with that. So it can scale up or scale out. So horizontal scaling versus vertical scaling. That is a consideration. Too many times I've seen on the security side, security again as a afterthought. So just like Art had said, security is got to be dealt with up front. Everything from identity and access management, who's coming in, what they're bringing into your solution, and how your solution is going to be managed and the security of it. Security is ultra important in today's world because there's more, I'm just going to say, hackers than ever out there. And any slip you make, you left a database open to the world, as we've recently heard, or you've left code unpatched, so infrastructure on the front end unpatched, open to the world, you've got a problem. So you can pre-plan for this way ahead of time. Way ahead of time, it's got to be pre-planned, and it doesn't take much to do it. On those 3 items, Art, any points before I go into Ingress?
Yeah, you know, I totally agree with you on, especially on the data. You know, everything that you're covering is extremely important, but you know, data has become, you know, the same thing as content is king. It's becoming data is king. And there's huge amounts of data that are being ingested, re-examined, regurgitated, and then put back out. And the most important thing that we do from an application point of view is try to create actionable intelligence out of these large data sets. So where the data lives, is there scalability of the data? Is there latency in getting to it? All of that is critical to the application and very important to that back-end infrastructure that you're talking about.
Agreed. Yeah, the analytics is what's the new gold right now, or the new oil, because it actually drives all the future decision making. So any pre-planning you can do with analytics up front, where a lot of people don't know this, but where analytics isn't run off the production system. So the production system there that you were talking about with the data patterns has a messaging system that will just say, I just updated that database, throw the message back into the analytics database or data warehouse or data lake to be consumed later. But that bit of information is precious in the other side. So, okay.
So one thing that John, that you mentioned there that I was interested in is just when you were talking about, you know, specialization versus generalization. You know, you mentioned you know, having developers work on development, having infrastructure specialists work on infrastructure. Would you say that it's pretty common for some companies, especially when they're maybe not staffed appropriately, to be employing a bit of a jack of all trades? So having developers working on infrastructure and considering themselves infrastructure specialists, or maybe just, you know, thinking that what their knowledge is sufficient. And what are some of the implications of having you know, that type of generalized skill set working on these things?
Well, it is real. It's actually leaning towards the developer side because of infrastructure as code. meaning that they can create scripts or programs, little programs that will deploy infrastructure in cloud environments and then deploy their code on top of that, and everything's in place. What's missing is the knowledge as to which infrastructure pattern to deploy for best result. Now, 10 years from now, all the developers that are out there right now that are deploying this in an immature fashion will actually learn to do that, and will learn what actually works out best, with just by testing it and validating it. But today's world, you require an infrastructure person to check with a development person to say, how are we going to handle ingress? How are we handling common scenarios on infrastructure so that it scales, so that they know they can write their code in such a way that it will actually accept the scaling parameters or the back-end scaling parameters, because both the infrastructure and the back-end scale. Art, anything on that with developers and infrastructure people, specialization?
Yeah, so specialization is key, and it's rare that you'll actually be able to see engineers go across being a great developer to being a great architect. There's certain skill sets there. We also think that as a boutique 200-person engineering company, we think that partnering is extremely important in the acquisition of skill sets, which is, I think, a great reason why the Envero Celestial Systems partnership is going to be very powerful in the marketplace, because of the overlap that we do have are on critical touch points, but we both bring a massive amount of expertise into specific areas that's a force multiplier, to use an Air Force term, for our customers.
Yeah, and respecting what each party's doing is actually key to getting the best result for the customer, so you truly get 1 and 1 equals 3.
Exactly. Or 1 and 1 equals 11.
Okay, and does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. That was great. Thanks, guys.
Okay. So I just want to talk about within the architecture side of things, we do things like ingress modeling. Again, it is always something that is left to development, but let's just take a look at what ingress means. It's traditionally, it would have been a group of people that are looking at your inbound internet connection for your services. And with that, they have a whole technology stack unto itself for inspecting that traffic, or for routing that traffic, or for blocking that traffic, basically for protecting that traffic. That is something that, again, a common oversight that we see is a developer turns on a service, deploys code to it, and sticks it directly onto the internet. There are these things out there called scanners. You can scan any IP v4 range you want. As soon as they scan, they'll see a response back on certain ports and protocols, and they will start loading in what's called a exploit database. And next thing you know, your data, your customer's data, is out there directly on the internet because of an exploit. So these ingress models protect that by denying people who are scanning, by denying, by inspecting traffic to see if it's malicious or not. It's like an antivirus scanner for all internet traffic coming into your solution. And we provide those kinds of solutions that are part of an end-to-end monitoring solution that would give your app better viability and protection. Art, anything on that point?
No, I think it's an excellent point. We have, you are looking at patterns of data across transmission modes. We're kind of doing the same thing, but within the actual application itself.
Right. And on the other side here, we have some items like monitoring. We set up end-to-end monitoring solutions. We set up out-of-band monitoring solutions. And it's weird to see within the marketplace, there's so many good tools, but rarely do you see them actually deployed effectively. And we're actually working with a lot of customers now to use third-party tools as well as to use built-in tools into, say, the Azure cloud application insights comes to mind, where they can actually get far more insight than you ever had traditionally with your application. So these tools will actually tell you your application's underperforming right now, or it could be where the choke point is or what's slow about it. We have automation methods as well. So everything that we do when we work with a customer and we define an architecture pattern, a data pattern, security ingress, we define automation tools that is called infrastructure as code. And what that does is it allows us to use what's called the CI/CD pipeline, so continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, from a coding tool where the developer makes a change in the code and it will actually come out into a development environment. When it's in that development or even production environment, it will automatically deploy. And when it does, it will either go to one or two states. It will either go to creating the infrastructure, or it will go and set the infrastructure back to the desired state. And if you think about it, what used to happen was we would say, oh, well, we need to deploy these servers and these services on them, and someone would go in and handcraft all that. And if that person was really good and really loyal to your company, it's great, you don't have a problem. Today's world has averaged a 20% turnover, and maybe people don't have the same skill set or same diligence in setting those services up. Why don't we allow the computer to do it for us? And that's what we do with all our automation. So we design an architecture pattern, get the consensus and sign off from the customer, and then we move to actually implementing it with code. Questions?
No, I think, I mean, there's a lot to take in there. You know, there's, you know, in the realm of automation, I mean, I'm sure we're just seeing the beginning. You know, everything's going to become more and more automated, you know, allowing for developers to, you know, be doing more and with less time, you know, becoming more efficient and being able to, you know, be forward thinking in that area is, you know, extremely valuable. So a lot of really interesting stuff there.
That automation is really one of the keystones or the cornerstones of what DevOps is, and it allows the developers who are embracing that more to actually take the lead over the infrastructure people in actually deploying some of these methods. They just don't have the infrastructure background to understand all the different aspects, but the automation is it's kind of like the glue that binds everything together.
Do you think that there's perhaps some hesitation from individuals who maybe don't trust, you know, not being as in control of what's being deployed? And
you mean Luddites? I don't know who wouldn't want a computer to do their job for you end to end. The old adage is that humans think and computers work, instead of why would a human want to do all that work that can be programmatically put out there? It's better. So just to give you an example, Amazon Web Services or Amazon Retail on Amazon Web Services deploys over 100 code changes an hour to their site. It is the pinnacle of DevOps, and everyone else is kind of driving towards that. And what they do is they do what's called blue-green integration and testing into their environments. So you cannot introduce anything into the production environment manually. It has to be coded in. And then it's watched and then moved in, and then that becomes production, and then the rest of production becomes the same. That is the ultimate way to actually make deployments. The other old adage is that you're not getting any value out of your developers unless they're writing features and putting it into your code. That's it. So if they're wasting time talking about anything else other than that, you're not getting the full value out of them. And with infrastructure as code and with these technologies, so Azure DevOps is one of them that integrates with it, and the CI/CD pipeline that I outlined, you would be able to actually give them a feature request. They would be able to throw that into, or do the coding and do the unit testing of that code locally, throw it into a pipeline, and then the automation just comes through at the end. No one is doing it beyond the testing. And we're going to get into some QA and development tasks here in a second. But when that data goes into production, it can be thrown into an environment that will auto scale horizontally, so add more CPU or RAM, or vertically, so add more nodes to be able to take that load for the customer demands. And that's what you want essentially with automation.
Awesome. So I know that we spent a lot of time on the architecture aspect, which is, it's great,
Yeah.
super important part. I guess we kind of, so there was two more items there. I know governance is one of them, and that's always something that we're big on. I don't know if maybe if we should just jump into development, or if just move over to development. All right, so yeah, let's jump back into the development slide, and then we'll kind of take it from here. Art, should we put it over to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, so our philosophy at Celestial Systems about delivering to a customer's requirement is that we're not delivering a software project. We're actually delivering a software product. And that product is going to live for a very long time in an extremely demanding, heterogeneous IT environment that will be challenged, across many, many different use scenarios. So from the very beginning of the development process, a lot of our customers and a lot of our competitors, they just start coding, right? They go to a YouTube video, how do you code this? And they just start coding. But we take a little bit of a different philosophy than that. And again, it's around software product and the entire software development lifecycle management concepts. So we want to brainstorm and implement a set of best practices for the particular application that we're developing and the product that we have to deliver. So we're always thinking in the beginning about test-driven development. So TDD is, a very powerful way of coding. It takes a lot of discipline. It seems like you're losing ground in the beginning on a project, but you're actually gaining it in the end. And by thinking about test-driven development, you are thinking about how good is your code going to be. And designing and coding elegant code is very important, especially in that continuous integration, continuous deployment environment where you're continually going to be iterating, adding features, functions, enhancements, deploying, adding features, fixing bugs, enhancing, deploying. It's very important that your code is elegant, that it's simple, and that it's built at the component level. Think of it as building Lego building blocks of capability and functionality that not only can you use for this product, but you also might be able to use for other products in a mix and match kind of scenario. And we do our coding and testing at a couple of different levels. What I'll call the proof of concept level coding, where we want to move quickly through that process to kind of make sure that everything that we're trying to develop and deliver is we can do it. We then move to pre-production coding, which is a next level down, where we're really starting to build out and enhance the robustness of the code, the functionality of the code, and the reliability of the code. And then we move into what we would call a production quality coding. And along the way, we're documenting everything that we do. We're ensuring that unit tests are being done by the developers, and they're helping the QA and test team, which is operating in parallel, and we'll talk about in the next section, to set the stage for their success around building functional tests. We're ensuring code coverage is complete, and that all aspects of the code are being covered during the tests, and that it's all going to come together in these three steps: POC, pre-production to production, through a series of iterative tests that are continuously looped back between the development team and the test and QA team.
Awesome. So, one thing that just as you're talking about, the importance of, having accurate, and I think you might have used the word elegant there, coding, and documentation and notes and things like that. One thing that I've encountered a bit of and seen people having challenges with is when you have a very, ever-changing and dynamic workforce. So you have, you're growing, or a lot of companies they're wanting to develop an enterprise application. They're growing quickly. They're having new team members come on. They may be in a competitive environment where the staff are getting a lot of opportunities with other organizations. And the challenge is where you do have staff changes and turnover. So you're having individuals having to come in and then decipher and understand the documentation and notes. from previous teammates and understanding the coding that's been done that maybe wasn't by them. Of course, when you're working with Celestial Systems, it can help to alleviate that because you're not working with FTEs, with full-time employees, where you might have some change in guard. But what are some of the things that companies can do to maybe avoid the pitfalls that come with new team members coming on and taking on partially completed work of old team members? Is this something that you see as a common challenge that companies face, and how can they maybe avoid that?
Yeah, absolutely. What we see with our customers out in the marketplace is just a huge amount of pressure for these development teams to show progress and satisfy the business. And sometimes they get ahead of themselves and need to put out a feature or a function. And you're right. What happens is that some of the discipline does disappear, especially around documentation and around the elegance of the code. We actually provide a service to our customers that's called a architecture and code review. We'll actually assign a very senior engineer for a couple of weeks to do a offline in parallel, out of the craziness of a development and delivery schedule, do that deep code review where you're sifting through what could be 10 years and 5 different developers working on that product, and every developer that came on board, as you said, approached the problem a little bit differently, didn't maybe have the discipline that the person before had or the person after that developer has. So we see that all the time in our customers, especially when they've asked us to either enhance an existing application where we've got to really go in and understand that code and what's going on in that code, or for them to say, hey, do we do a complete rewrite, or do we just upgrade to the next version of the framework? So it's a real problem out there that exists. One of my basic standards is we're always talking about modernizing legacy, but I think legacy is here to stay and will always be there. And it's something that, it's like an archaeological dig when you go through some of these large enterprise companies. Sometimes it's better just to, forget all of that and start from scratch. Sometimes you've got too much invested and too much core corporate knowledge in these systems to do that.
Okay, great, good points. Should we pass it over to John? Art, do you have any other items you want to mention just on the development side?
Yeah, no, that's great. It's really all about doing a step-by-step, Lego block approach to building capability that you then mix and match those capability components to build an enterprise application, and doing that in a very elegant manner with a lot of testing.
Anytime that there can be a Lego analogy thrown into a discussion, I'm all for it. So
Excellent.
It helps me to really grasp the subject, because that's where that's what I try to relate everything to, really, is with my Lego experience.
There you go.
John, over to yourself.
Yeah, just to touch on a couple of points there that Art said, it is really all about the relationship. And what you get within some of these disciplines is people that are insular, meaning that they are, hey, I know what I'm doing it, and that's a red flag unto itself. Or you get a group of people that are keeping to themselves instead of working with other people to actually develop the best possible solution. It's proven that a group beats a team, or pardon me, a group beats an individual. That bigger teams beat smaller teams, and more diverse teams win more often. So the more diversity between coding and between infrastructure people that you can get together, the better. And that's why this Vero Celestial Systems partnership and driving towards customer success is actually going to be critical. Mark?
Yeah, I like the comment just about driving towards customer success, because I think that's ultimately what we're wanting to do, right? Is ensure that our customers are seeing the success that's that we want them to see, and that they ultimately are wanting to work with us in order to achieve. So having that that constant, having that as being the ultimate measure, the ultimate yardstick, that customer success and being able to achieve their return I know that's always something that we're wanting to make sure is our focus.
Agreed.
Okay, so where are we here on the development side? Have we, John, if we were to put it over to yourself, do you have any comments you want to make just around? I know there's a few items here: code management, pipeline automation, things like that.
Yeah, I touched on a lot of this stuff previously, and I really just wanted to comment on Art's job of going over everything there, which was, I just commented on that just a second ago. So within the development stack and framework, it's that relationship with development crews and with the developers themselves to actually build out a better project overall, a better outcome for the customer. So
yeah, I especially like if you could just go back one slide. I especially like the assist developers with infrastructure and the pipeline automation, because that really is part of the entire process. Agree with you 100%. You don't want people working in isolation. They have to understand not only who they're working with, but the infrastructure they're working with as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Awesome. All right, well, let's jump over to the test QA side. I know that we're getting a little bit of feedback on the mic. I'm not really sure where that's coming from, or if you guys are hearing that, but we'll apologize for that if it's being heard on the audience side. But let's jump into the testing Q&A portion. So I know that this is, of course, where a lot of the time rubber meets the road, and where it's both the most important, in some cases, the most important aspect of this flow, and then also in a lot of cases something that doesn't have enough attention put in and can be done in a little bit of a sloppy manner. So, Art, why don't we put it over to yourself? You can just kind of kick us off here on the testing and Q&A side of this flow.
Yeah, I agree with you. Celestial Systems definitely agrees this is where the rubber meets the road on the delivery of an enterprise web application. And while we're talking about this serially, you really got to look at the test QA develop kind of as like a circular iterative pattern where they're going back and forth with each other. And I do believe that you need two separate teams, but that process is always going to be iterative and circular until everything is done. So there really is a parallel effort with the QA all the way from developing manual tests in the beginning just to get tests running, to find the initial issues, to work with the developers on their development of the test-driven development philosophy, to look at that unit testing. But it's very, very important to start your automation planning and automation implementation around writing automated test scripts as soon as possible, to get that early, to use our favorite expression, the Lego component capability testing in place very, very quickly. We have talked to so many customers that get straight into manual testing and feel that taking a step back and doing, or a step sideways and doing the automation planning and test script writing, they feel like they're losing ground. But 99.9% of the time, those teams regret not doing the automation planning and test script writing and automation, test automation implementation in parallel to what they're doing with manual. Because what's happening, and I'm sure you see it all the time, is that applications are put out with a few features, but right behind them are 5 more features that need to go out that are important, or right behind it is a massive scaling of a rollout to 20 different countries. And if you haven't set up automation testing, you are not going to be able to do that quickly. So it's really critically important that a test framework is put in place, that test automation planning and test script writing are done, and not just stick with the manual testing. And as these two teams work together on that, they become more and more integrated as progress is made, and Dev and QA really start to build that great teamwork that you need. And again, to bring it back to your terminology, that continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline leads to a functional end-to-end test, where you're absolutely going to be able to do that end-to-end test where you're now ready to go back to the business owner and the product owner and say, we think the application is ready. Why don't you bring your users in?
Agreed. And you get that value out of the development team right away instead of delaying it because of QA.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's an old saying that when the U.S. Army reviewed friendly fire and how they could deal with what friendly fire is they determined that all the rules of friendly fire had to be done before or had to be implemented before the bullet left the gun. And with that, if you think about what QA is, that's one of your only stops before you go into the production environment and either hit a catastrophe or hit a unexpected outcome. So get it done in QA as much as possible. So we work with companies that do a lot of different QA process or require more QA process within their environment, and we put them into Microsoft Azure test dev environments. They work with things like Selenium or otherwise and do all these different tests that Art was alluding to. But the outcome is that we enable those people to the QA people, and QA is its own discipline. No matter what anyone says, it is its own discipline within the development world. And those people are worth their weight in gold in being able to actually ensure that it's put in place.
Yeah, completely agree.
I wonder if a lot of companies and teams, they might feel that they're very sophisticated in the QA aspect, and but there's maybe just an inherent desire to get things out a bit quicker. They have a lot of trust in their work that they've done. They feel like, okay, we
not good enough.
We're experts, and we don't really make a lot of mistakes, and we'll do a bit of testing, a bit of Q&A, but we got a deadline to meet, right? And the business owners and the stakeholders, they want this thing out there, so we're going to push it along and maybe accept a few issues post deployment, just because we feel like we have enough confidence in our skills. I wonder how much of that there is out there.
Oh, there's lots of that out there, but what people are grossly underestimating is the complexity of these changes. You could introduce a change and you cannot see the downstream effect unless you run through a full set of tests, because these applications are 20 years old and there's a lot of technical debt or legacy within them. And I wouldn't accept anything unless they had empirical proof.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. I mean, so many times we've talked to developers that are customers that, my favorite line is, well, it works on my machine. And you know what? It probably does, and you did a great job developing it, but your machine lives in a bubble, and it's a pretty ugly world out there in the entire IT environment, and it's got to work across 6 different browsers and 7 different mobile devices. So why don't we do some more test and QA?
Yeah, for sure. I works on my machine is something I think everybody's probably heard a million times.
Yeah.
I wonder if there was, it's probably impossible, but if there could be some sort of, calculation as to, time spent in QA and the value of that, finding mistakes in that stage as opposed to finding mistakes post deployment, and if there could be some sort of almost universally accepted unit of measurement, every hour or every sprint or whatever it is spent in QA is going to, allow you to reap the X amount of benefits of not finding those mistakes post deployment. I don't know if there maybe is some sort of saying or something like that, but it'd be great if it could be, something universally adoptive, the ROI, the return, the benefits spent, spending more time in QA and testing.
I've seen those. I can't remember what it was, but I remember every time you missed a step, it went up by a factor of 10, the cost to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find it in the architecture phase, you've fixed a problem, it costs you $1. If you find it in the development phase, it costs you $10. If you find a bug in the testing QA, it costs you $100. But if it's out in the field, it costs you $100,000, right?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. That's perfect.
Yeah, there is. It does scale by an order of magnitude for sure.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I like that. I might steal that off you and use that in future discussions.
Absolutely.
Should we jump into the production stage, and anything else on testing and QA that we should cover before we move over?
No, I think we did a great job there.
Okay, let's get into production. So we're ready to go. We got a little rocket ship icon here, kind of symboling, what we feel is the stage of our development, and we're ready to blast off. So what are some of the things that we're as we're in that final stage, getting ready for production, that are the most critical points that people should be looking at?
So from our point of view, our developers and the QA team have both agreed that we are ready to commit the code. And we are ready to commit the code in a two-phase rocket, a two-stage rocket. The first stage is to do final acceptance testing internally, and then end user acceptance testing. So final acceptance testing is when you're now involving, the food chain, the architects, the developers, and the product owner in the testing. They're now looking at the screen. They look at the color of the buttons, and they're looking at the placement of the buttons, and they're looking for latency and response times and all of the other things. So that's stage one of the rocket taking off. And then stage two is they're actually going to bring the end users. And what I mean by the end users is people outside of that development or management community, and either the employees, you pick a section of employees that are going to use it, you go out to trusted customers to say, here's the application that we're ready to release to you, would you help us test it? Or if it's like a supply chain management type of application where you've got a series of partners that are using the application as a platform to send it out to them for user acceptance testing. 90% of the time, there'll be tweaks coming back. Then it's really up to the product owner to decide whether they're going to change the color shade of blue to somebody else's preference. Do we need to make that button bigger? Do we need to make the table column smaller? But those are all tweaks that, if you've done the great job of architecting it, the Lego blocks of capability in an elegant way, are very, very easy to run through updates and get through that CI to CD pipeline again. And then have formal sign-off application and hand it to the Envero team for worldwide deployment.
So I know that this is a bit more of a, as opposed to a technical decision, it's a bit more of a business decision. But one thing that you said that kind of caught my ear was, going out to a trusted set of customers. Have you seen in the past, or maybe experienced yourself, or seen other companies do this, where they might actually request for customers to be part of that early adoption group, and bake in some sort of benefit model around that? So I think that there's probably a lot of organizations out there that really very much want to be part of that, early tester, get those features early, even if there might be issues with them. And then there's probably some companies that are thinking, hell no, keep that away from me, I'm not touching that with a 100-foot pole. We only want things when they're completely polished. Is there something that can be done from a business perspective that can maybe help to provide additional perceived value for those customers that want to be a part of that early adoption group? And is there some way to bake that into an agreement with them?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've done, and I think that we certainly have relationships at Celestial Systems to do that, is create what we would call a user group. And let's say as a company, you're building a product and the product has thousands of users. Well, you want to select 10, 15 users and definitely bring them inside the tent. You want them, and they, I've never worked with a customer that didn't want to be inside the tent on a critical application that they were going to be using for their business. So creating that, bringing them inside the tent, having the ability to have their users really, stress test this, bang on it, and provide that feedback and see progress on their comments is, I think, a really great relationship that you've developed with customers if you have that kind of relationship with your customers. I encourage all companies to have a core set of either users or customers that that trial run this before they go to full production.
Also, I wonder if that could even be some sort of revenue driver where, you're looking at it, you have a pro licensing, program where, hey, if you want to be on the pro licensing, you're going to get features early, and you're kind of, almost, charging for the ability to test these features so that it's a revenue driver. I mean, that might be a bit much, but just, my sales brain is just churning through this and trying to think, how can we capitalize on giving our customers what they want and then also get the most out of it for ourselves. So just food for thought anyways.
Yeah.
John, why don't we kick it over to yourself on the production side? Where does Envero come in here, and how are we providing the most value at this stage?
So just out of the gate, by the time an application is ready for production, we've already worked with development teams to create infrastructure as code, as I had previously described. That infrastructure as code process ensures that your development, QA, staging, production environments are identical. So a big problem people have is that they're deploying in one, as Art alluded to, it works on my machine. Well, you could actually have a lot of things different between your development environment, your test environment, and your production environment. And the more aligned those environments are, the better. The only way to ensure that is to have a computer build them. Okay, just wanted to put that out there within to really promote what infrastructure as code is. Within this process, we help companies with operations models that actually help them to support these applications. And one of the key aspects is something called out-of-band monitoring. So within the DevOps world, they call it observability. And observability has inside my infrastructure a type of internal monitoring and logging and log aggregation, and I can get lots of value from that. The problem is that this internal monitoring isn't the actual end user experience. The end user experience actually involves outside of whatever cloud you've deployed it, and that final mile into that customer's home or customer's business. So it's their experience and on their computers and their browsers. So we implement all kinds of out-of-band monitoring, which is different than the internal monitoring. And the out-of-band monitoring provides that customer feedback where the customer, you're going to get things like availability from various sensors all over the world, as well as performance. How long does your application take to load? What changed between today and yesterday? So that you can actually pinpoint, oh, someone added new code to it, and that new code is levering a partner for a analytics or for a marketing campaign that is slow. It's instead of it taking days to figure that out, you can precisely pinpoint that down right away. And then on top of that, we do all kinds of cost management for cloud environments. And that cost management is really helping to push value, not just identifying outliers, but actually identifying where optimizations can happen, where you can actually get a better bang for your buck in what's called reserved instances, committing to that cloud provider, or alternatively, if you're using something and it's only coming back that it uses it for 5% of its capacity over a month over month for the last few months, consider resizing that. And that's one of the beauties of the cloud, is that you can resize it because everything's month to month or everything is negotiable.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think that, looking at that, the reserved instance, and I know that different cloud providers have different terms for it, but, looking at that potential for reserved instances can save, a massive amount of money. I mean, I know that we did a project for a customer recently where we did an audit of some of their existing infrastructure, and right away we found an immediate $50,000 savings for their subscriptions, just based on reserved instances for things that they were going to be using no matter what. So and you're able to pay month to month anyway, so it's not really hitting your pocketbook as in any way except for a positive. So
commitment, you're making the commitment, but there's ways to back out of the commitment with a minor penalty. But yeah, for sure.
All
So
right.
that's-
So where do we go from here? I think maybe talking a bit about there's a lot of good points in looking at the development life cycle. I think that it's easy to see how there's some good synergy between the organizations and what the different respective responsibilities are for helping companies to develop and ultimately launch their enterprise application. Maybe just as a cap off, we can talk a bit about what how our two companies work together. What is it that Celestial Systems and Envero is providing when combined in a project, and how companies can leverage our expertise to get the most out of their application. I'm wondering who would be the best person to maybe I'll ask you guys who would be the best person to kick this off and talk about this at a high level here.
I'll start. I think that if you don't mind, John.
Please do.
Yeah, no, I think the partnership has such great synergies for the marketplace and the set of potential customers out there, and I believe that we have the expertise to service large Fortune 500 companies, as well as the approach to customer intimacy that will help a 15-person company get their application and their new business up and running. I do believe that the configuration of the Celestial team and the configuration of the Envero team, and then as we come together, has that skill set capability as well as that high touch customer facing capability. So we can literally do everything, end to end. Give us the requirements document, and we will do everything that we just mentioned in the last hour that we've been discussing this, all the way through to we'll do certain aspects of it. We'll do the test and QA cycle of it. We'll do. Hold on one second, guys. Sorry. We will do everything from the QA to just helping you guys deploy. So I think that the partnership is very powerful, and the overlap is in the right touch points, as I said before.
Yeah, I agree. We do. One of the best parts of the relationship is, again, the different disciplines. And Celestial Systems has got the right approach to fast tracking the development process as it's levering, again, items like infrastructure as code or getting the value out of the developer. But Vero is bringing to the table a pattern database. So we know what works with different kinds of infrastructures and different kinds of technology stacks. And as infinite as people think the configurations are, it's really quite finite. But knowing, remember, you can go out and get a certification on this, but knowing and having the experience of working with all these different architecture patterns is what best fits Celestial's point where their code is going to actually run in, or their database is going to run in. So we can drive customers into that far quicker than they can do it themselves. And together, the customer gets a way better outcome.
Yeah, very well put. If you go back one slide, sorry, if you just go back one slide, yeah. So I also believe that the reward for excellent work is more work, and really the ready for production is just the launch to go back to start designing the new features and functions and starting this process, over again as you build either the next application or add features or capability to an existing application. So that continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline concept applies to these phases as well.
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. Yeah, so I think that's a good point actually, where something that maybe not everybody would consider is that this pipeline, this process it's not just about the application as a whole, but as new features and new functionality is added to it, they need to go all the way back and go through the process for each new feature or add-on that's being put onto that product. That you can't be skipping steps just because the baseline functionality is there. You might have to make sure that the level of quality and all the steps are being hit for every new thing that you do with that application down the road as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate your time. I think this is the first real kind of webinar style, discussion that we've had that has been a bit more formalized. I think it went really well. We had a lot of good back and forth. I'm sure that we're going to continue to do more of these in the future, and we'd love to hear any kind of feedback from any of our customers or potential customers that are out there listening to this, or really just interested parties that would have requests for future topics or questions as a follow-up from the discussion that we had today. So, by all means, if anybody does have any questions or comments, please do feel free to get in touch. I'm sure we'll have contact details that'll be included somehow along with this video. So do get in touch. Let us know if you have any feedback, questions. Help. Maybe if you'd like to join a webinar yourself, we're more than happy to have guests on in the future too. So, and we do these things pretty casually. We throw up some topics and just try to talk through them and get the most out of the discussion in a way that's as natural as possible. So everything you've heard today is mostly actually not mostly, it is 100% unscripted. And just some experts generally talking about some topics that we're very interested in. So I'm sure that we will continue to do more of these, and they'll get better and more interesting as we go along. But I think, guys, thank you both for your time and your efforts today. I thought it went really well. There's a lot of really good stuff that came out of this. Any closing comments from either yourselves, or maybe yourself first?
No, I really enjoyed the discussion. I think it's important and very critical to the business and the market that we're in right now. And Mark and John, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Art. Your comments were valued, and thanks, Mark, also for facilitating this.
No problem. Thank you, John, as well. And thanks, everybody, for listening, for taking the time to hear us chat about these things. We look forward to any comments or feedback we get in the future, but otherwise we'll sign off and talk to you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's it.